Back to our top story now. The passage of a U.S. bill to overturn the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. But Wynn is a managing partner at lobbying firm TRP, Health Policy. He is in Denver and joins me live, and we appreciate it very much. Within just the last couple of hours, at a joint appearance with the Prime Minister of Australia, U.S. President Donald Trump said to him, "You have better health care than we do." They have universal health care in Australia, as do many developed countries. Having said that, how would you explain to someone who is outside of the U.S. why health care coverage is such an emotional, heated debate in the U.S.?
Well, I think it became especially so after passage of the Affordable Care Act, because when Democrats were preparing the bill and in many cases reaching out to Republicans for their support, Republicans made a conscious decision to have health reform be President Obama's Waterloo. And instead of working together with Democrats on how to make the healthcare system better, they ignored the contents of the Affordable Care Act and went on a 7-year campaign to demonize it and persuade the American people that the benefits that are in there, including expanding coverage to over 20 million Americans, weren't in fact there. And now that they're looking at repealing those benefits, the American people are starting to finally see in great relief the benefits they've been getting and how tragic it would be to see those repealed.
So are you essentially saying that health care coverage is so deeply political in the U.S. that this is just the way it's going to be handled?
Well, I think we can always hope for better. I think that what we just saw today was a pretty sad day for America, certainly American politics. But I think that the Senate, hopefully, cooler heads will prevail. Certainly, they're not going to take up the bill that the House passed. And while one would hope for a bipartisan process in that chamber, at the very least.
If I can get in for just a moment, though, on something that you're saying, let's talk about it moving on to the Senate. There are some parts of Obamacare that are extremely popular, and obviously things like protections for pre-existing conditions. For this thing to actually become law, do you see that as something that somewhere along the way there's going to have to be some sort of compromise on as it works its way through the Senate?
Well, I think that the challenge with compromise at this point is that the starting point for this bill is $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts, 24 million people losing their coverage, premiums and out-of-pocket costs going up, all to pay for tax cuts for the very top fraction of the 1% of Americans. So I don't think Democrats are going to play in that ball field, and we need to let go of the idea of making people who have pre-existing conditions like cancer and other chronic illnesses, women who are pregnant, will now constitute a pre-existing condition under the House bill. We've got to get rid of those horrible ideas and start again if we want to actually enact law that's going to improve things for the American people.
So what is going to be different as the Senate deliberates this? What is going to be different for them?
Well, you have a number of Senate Republicans who are concerned about the cuts to Medicaid, especially to the Medicaid expansion that has occurred in many states, including several states that have Republican senators. So that's a very important one that I think will be addressed by the Senate. Clearly, the removal of protections for people with pre-existing conditions, the age tax there under the House bill would no longer be any limit on what insurers can charge people due to their age. The elimination of essential benefits that not only impacts people in the Obamacare exchanges, but also people with employer-sponsored coverage. So all of those items, I think, are going to get a very careful look in the Senate. And to be frank, I think it's going to be difficult for Senate Republicans to find anything that relates to the House-passed bill that will get 50 of them to vote for it at the end of the day.
So if there's still this long road ahead before this actually becomes law, if in fact it does, the fact that there was such a very public celebration about this today with the House Republicans and U.S. President Donald Trump, what does this say about the political climate as it pertains to health care coverage?
Well, I think what we saw today was really unusual, and it was willfully ignorant of the long path ahead. I think it was a celebration that they were able to persuade enough Republicans that the bill will do things that it actually will not do, including a slew of amendments that were added literally last night. And I think they were proud of themselves for having pulled that off. It was quite a stunt. But I think in the long run, all 217 members of the Republican Party who voted for that bill are going to regret it, because this Congressional Budget Office score is coming out next week, and we have a long time before the next elections for the American people to understand exactly what those members of Congress voted for. And believe me, I would love to tell you a better story, but this is where we're at with American politics, at least on the Republican side, where their primary concern was to repeal Obamacare or pass something they could at least say is repealing Obamacare, with little regard for the actual impact on American people.
Bill, it took a while for the approval ratings on Obamacare to get above 50%. That took a while. There are things now that people really like about Obamacare. There have been criticisms from the beginning, things about it that were flawed. Could you fault Republicans for wanting to change things about it? Is it the things that they changed that concerns you the most?
Yeah, I don't think anybody would argue that the Affordable Care Act is perfect. You're talking about 20% of our economy. Certainly the direction of it was good. Before the Affordable Care Act, you could be charged more because you have cancer or pre-existing condition. Women could be charged more than men. Older people could be charged exorbitant rates to make coverage unaffordable for them. So those were very, very positive steps. But this is a very complicated issue, and Democrats, even the president, former President Obama himself, have readily conceded that there are things about the law that they would like to see improved, and I think they would be eager to work with Republicans in a substantive, bipartisan way to assess what those components are. But I think that the reason that the polling is only starting to change now is because the Republican campaign over the last 7 years has been highly successful. The campaign to miseducate the American people about what the Affordable Care Act actually does. And now I think they're somewhat victims of that campaign, because they are now stuck delivering on this promise to repeal that law, which they said was so bad. But in fact, the nucleus of it is quite good and is something the American people have grown to expect.
All right. Well, still a lot of debate ahead on this topic. Bill Wynn, managing partner at TRP Health Policy. Thank you.